Following the announcement by the Saudi-led coalition of the closure of Yemen's sea and airports, humanitarian access into and out of the country is halted. All parties to the conflict must allow and facilitate safe, rapid, unhindered humanitarian access to all people in need through all ports and airports. Any further shock to the imports of food and fuel may reverse recent successes in mitigating the threat of famine in Yemen. Humanitarians have reached more than 7 million people with direct food assistance this year alone. We urge the parties not to escalate the situation further and to follow their fundamental obligations of distinction, proportionality, and precautions, taking constant care to spare civilians and civilian infrastructure. The UN calls on all parties to ensure the safety of humanitarian workers and assets through Yemen. The United Nations calls on all states with influence over the parties to ensure their respect for international humanitarian law and the protection of civilian and civilian infrastructure. Humanitarian agencies operate in an impartial, neutral, and independent manner. Any party's interference with these principles significantly hampers humanitarian agencies' ability to deliver aid to those in need. Meanwhile, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights said it is deeply concerned by a series of attacks in Yemen over the past week that have killed dozens of civilians, including several children. It appealed to all parties to respect international law governing armed conflict. The Human Rights Office is also very concerned that humanitarian aid destined for innocent civilians caught up in the 3-year-long conflict may be adversely affected by the coalition's decision on Monday to close all land, sea, and airports into the country. More details in the Geneva press briefing. Turning to Syria, our humanitarian colleagues remain deeply concerned about the humanitarian situation in East Ghouta. Almost 400,000 civilians remained inside the besieged area where they face deteriorating humanitarian health, living, and security conditions. The population represents nearly 95% of the entire besieged population within Syria. Recent World Food Program assessments indicate severe shortages of food supply, a sharp increase in the price of basic commodities and communities, a further eroding of coping mechanisms. The cost of standard food baskets in October is almost 10 times higher than the national average. The UN is also concerned over a recent escalation of airstrikes in Aleppo and Idlib governorates. Over the past 48 hours, multiple and sustained airstrikes were reported in the southern countryside of Aleppo governorate and parts of Idlib governorate. We call on all parties to the conflict to take all measures to protect civilians, as required under international humanitarian law. Meanwhile, the United Nations Assistance Mission in Iraq has taken note of the statement concerning the recent ruling by the High Federal Court. The UN mission urges the government of the Kurdistan region of Iraq to acknowledge, endorse, and respect the ruling of the federal court and reiterate its full commitment to the Constitution. UNAMI re-emphasizes the urgent need for political dialogue and negotiations between Baghdad and Erbil in a spirit of partnership and respect for the Iraqi constitution that itself respects the constitutional rights of the Kurdistan region of Iraq. The mission also reconfirmed its readiness to play a facilitating role in this dialogue and these negotiations if requested by both the federal government and the Kurdistan regional government. And our colleagues in the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan today released a report which shows a sharp increase in attacks against places of worship, religious leaders, and worshippers in the countries, and in particular against Shia Muslims. The report also documents targeted killings by anti-government forces of religious scholars and leaders whom they regard as pro-government, as well as targeted killing of security personnel amidst worshippers inside mosques. Since January 2016, the mission has recorded 850 civilian casualties, 233 people killed, and 577 injured in 51 attacks, targeting places of worship, religious leaders, and worshippers. This is nearly double the number of documented attacks of these types between 2009 and 2015. That report is available online. And the UN Migration Agency today said the remains of 26 women and girls were recovered over the weekend during the rescue operations off the coast of Libya, most of them Nigerian girls who were making their way to Italy. The agency warned it has observed a significant increase in the number of women and girls arriving in Italy over the past 3 years, noting that most of them are under the age of 18. The IOM said it is mostly likely they have been victims of human trafficking. Many of the survivors from the rescue operation said they had been abused and some had lost relatives at sea. The UN Migration Agency said some 50 of those group of migrants are still missing. And also in Libya, the World Health Organization yesterday delivered 5 emergency health kits to the town of Ghoutta. These kits are designed to meet the basic health needs of 5,000 people for approximately 3 months and will help struggling health facilities to deliver primary health services. WHO is also working on making the local hospital fully functional in the coming weeks. And the UN head of the UN mission in Mali, Mohamed Saleh Anadif, today condemned a series of attacks that took place yesterday in the country in which 9 civilians and 1 member of the National Guard was killed. Also want to flag that the Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights, Andrew Gilmore, was in Mali between the 2nd and the 5th of November. He met with authorities as well as the joint G5 Sahel force. The purpose of the visit was to reinforce the importance of human rights and justice in the peace process and to discuss the establishment of a mechanism to guarantee respect for human rights during the deployment of the joint G5 Sahel force. The Human Rights Office will be issuing a full press release shortly. And our humanitarian colleagues in the Democratic Republic of the Congo tell us today that a recent mission in the Tanganyika, southeast of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, found more than 70,000 displaced people by renewed violence. Their needs include food security, health, education, shelter, and protection. Humanitarian assistance to the area has been limited as underfunding has a significant impact on the delivery of humanitarian assistance in the DRC this year, with the response plan being only 42% funded. And UNHCR has just completed the first phase of the Rohingya refugee family counting, where more than 500,000 refugees from Myanmar have so far been counted. The exercise conducted by UNHCR, Bangladesh's Refugee and Relief and Repatriation Commission, took place in the Kutupalong camp and in the extension areas and the Balukali areas, which is now extending further south. So far, the counting exercise has gathered data on 120,284 families, comprising 500,000 refugees. The UNHCR teams found that 1/3 of the families are vulnerable. As many as 14% are single mothers, holding the families together with little support in harsh camp conditions. Others are struggling with serious health problems. There's also a high proportion of elderly people at risk, and children make up 54% of the total population. 52% are women. And just as you know, in Bonn, Germany, the climate change conference is now in full swing. Some of the highlights from today include a pledge by the HSBC Bank to mobilize $100 billion in sustainable financing and investment to support the transition to a low-carbon economy and to spur green growth worldwide. The release of the report by the EU saying it is on track for its 2020 target emissions reduction. We'll keep you posted. And my guest today will be Liu Zhenmin, the new Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs. He will brief you on the synthesis report of the 2017 Voluntary National Review, which, as you all know, is about progress achieved in the implementation of the SDGs. And lastly, we say thank you to our friends in Beirut, in Lebanon, who have paid their regular budget due in full this year, bringing us up to what? Perfect. If you have a question, you can ask. Otherwise, you can yield. No question. Michelle, and then James.
Thanks, Steph. On the climate change conference, Syria said they're going to sign up. Have you received anything?
We've not received any official notification that I'm aware of. We've asked a couple of people in this building who'd be best placed to know. But as soon as we get confirmation that something has happened, we will share that with you.
And on Yemen, has the SG spoken with anyone from Saudi Arabia?
There are no contacts that I'm able to share with you at this point, though. I know details I can share you, but I can assure you that there have been contacts between the UN and Saudi authorities at various levels over the last 24 to 48 hours. James?
On Yemen again, does the UN believe that by its actions, this blockade, that Saudi is in breach of international humanitarian law?
I'm not in a position to issue a legal ruling. What we do know is that the blockading of ports and airports and land routes can have a tremendously negative impact on a situation which is already catastrophic. We have some food stocks already in country that we would be able to deliver, but you also have to imagine there is also this sort of news can also have an impact on market prices, where food prices may go up in local markets, fuel prices may go up as people start to fear a long-term impact of a blockade. So, regardless of the legal implication, the humanitarian implications can be catastrophic. Madame, and then Monsieur.
Thank you, Stephane. On the allegation by Hezbollah's role in the Persian Gulf, Saudi is considering that the missile attack is an act of war by Lebanon as well. Do you have any reaction on this?
Look, we have seen the various reports coming out of the region, which we're following very closely. I think we would call for restraint, not only in action, but also in rhetoric, in what is clearly a very volatile situation.
Do you take this allegation seriously?
The message coming from the Secretary General of the United Nations is for restraint, both in actions and in words.
Sure. On Yemen, I wanted to ask you about President or Hadi, who's in Saudi Arabia. It's reported actually that Saudi Arabia has I guess banned him from visiting even the part of the country not held by the Houthis, Aden. I don't know if you've seen this report, but I guess my question would be if he is Ismail Sheikh Ahmed's interlocutor, is he aware that he's essentially under house arrest?
We've seen the reports.
Right.
We have no way of confirming those. We have no way of confirming those reports.
Is the envoy in contact with Hadi? It seems like
the envoy is in contact with various parties.
And it's the President of the Security Council said there's going to be an any other business briefing on Yemen tomorrow, and I wanted to know, has anyone in the Secretariat, whether Mr. Lowcock or
my understanding
BPA,
is there will at least be a briefing by the Emergency Relief Coordinator. If others brief, we will let you know. Madame.
On Yemen too, you said that there were contacts between the UN and different Saudi officials. Could you elaborate on that, and whether these contacts also touched upon what's going on in Saudi Arabia itself now regarding the Thank you.
I can't give you more detail, but to tell you that the focus of the contacts were on the humanitarian situation in Yemen. Mr. Avni.
So the Saudis claim that there was a missile shot from Yemen on Riyadh. Do you have any confirmation of that?
We have no confirmation. I have no confirmation. I think Fahan addressed that yesterday, but we have no confirmation. We've seen the reports, but as I said, Fahan addressed that yesterday.
But nothing since yesterday.
No, sir.
Additionally, the U.S. just issued a statement based on Saudi report from last July of missiles shot from Yemen by the Houthis that were made in violation of Security Council by Iran. Do you have any confirmation of that?
I do not. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Stephane. President Trump will soon meet with President Xi of China to discuss various global issues. What importance does the Secretary General grant to their discussion of global peace?
Well, Secretary General is not a foreign policy analyst. I will let you, all of you, decided the importance of the meeting, but it is clear that I think any type of high-level dialogue, especially between these two countries, is a positive thing. Sir.
Steph, given the December 2016 agreement in the DRC calling for elections by the end of this year and the subsequent announcement by the Electoral Commission announcing elections by December 2018, does the United Nations believe that Joseph Kabila should remain president of the DRC in the year ahead?
Look, it's not for the UN to decide who will be lead one country or another. We've seen the announcement by the Electoral Commission regarding the elections. While regretting that these crucial polls have once again been postponed, we continue to call on political leaders on all sides to place their interests of their country, and their people above all else, and to ensure the holding of credible, free, and fair elections. It's important to rebuild the trust, I think, between the political class and the Congolese citizens.
In fairness, the UN has in the past commented about respecting the constitutional mandates of leaders. This would not. This would be outside of the mandate. His term expired last year. So it's a very specific question as to whether he should remain in power, given that his mandate has already lapsed.
Look, we understand that Parliament, and we call on Parliament to still pass the remaining electoral legislation, encourage the implementation of confidence-building measures foreseen in the agreement signed last December, the full respect for the civil and political rights. As I said, constitutions need to be respected, but we're not in the, and I will leave it at that. How's that, Linda? Yeah.
Thank you, Steph. We know that about 600,000 Rohingya have fled to Bangladesh, and yesterday the Security Council obviously issued a presidential statement expressing grave concern over human rights violations, including killings, rapes, etc. I was wondering if the UN has any statistics, or the latest statistics perhaps, in terms of numbers, in terms of how many people have been raped, how many killings have occurred.
You know, our human rights colleagues, as well as UNHCR, has been, but especially our human rights colleagues, have been interviewing refugees. So we can extrapolate from those interviews the fact that many of these refugees have undergone horrendous experiences, whether when they were in northern Rakhine State, or when they had to flee, or on the road. I'm not sure we're in a position to give hard numbers of exactly how many of these incidents have happened.
But just to follow up, but may I ask, is there a sense that that the UN is referring to hundreds or thousands, or just some general scope?
I'm afraid I'm not able to do that. Mr. Lee and then Mr. Avni.
Sure. Follow up some other stuff, but on the DRC, I wanted to ask you this. The U.S. the State Department put out a press release saying the U.S. notes the importance of President Kabila abiding by the DRC's constitution, reaffirmed in the Saint Sylvestre Accord, that he will not seek a third term and will step down following elections. So is that the UN's? Is that your understanding as well, that is what is required?
I think my understanding is the fact that I used every word that I could think of in answering your colleague's question.
Right. I mean,
okay.
could
And
you
I will leave it to what I've already answered.
Okay. You may have seen the speech by the King of Morocco, in which he said that there will be no solution to Western Sahara that's not fully in accord with Morocco's sovereignty, which basically means it's not really clear what is really being negotiated, given that statement. I wanted to know, is there any response by either Mr. Kohler or by the Secretariat? And also, is it the case, was Mr. Kohler's recent visit to the region, was he restricted of traveling anywhere that he wanted within Western Sahara? Because I've heard that he has, and I wanted to
I'm not aware of restrictions. I'm not aware of these, of whatever restrictions, obviously, on these trips. Itineraries are negotiated. I'm not going to react to the King's speech. There is a mandate from the Security Council for the personal envoy, as well as MINURSO, and we will follow that mandate and continue our work.
And you'd said earlier, I'd asked you about this case of the Western Sahara journalist who's now been twice denied accreditation. You said you'd look into whether this is under the policy of needing to be from a member state of the General Assembly. Were you able to check that out?
I don't recall, but I'll check again. Mr. Avni.
Just to follow up on your answer before, that you said that you have no independent information on the July 20 report. But since this is allegedly a violation of Security Council
No,
resolution.
I didn't say I had no. I just said I had nothing to add. I didn't say any information.
You say you had no information. We
Go
can
ahead.
go
What's
back
your-
to the
what's your
videotape.
question?
My question is,
Thank God we
since-
don't have instant replay here. Yeah.
Can you get the instant replay? My question is, since the allegation by the U.S. and others is that this is a violation of Security Council resolution, should you look at the
I will go back
Saudi
and look at the
report?
July incident. I have no further information on this most recent incident.
But should the UN independent, I don't know, DPA or any other department look at allegations of
Well,
violations
obviously,
of
Security Council
resolution?
resolution committees also have authority in this domain. Mr. Lee.
I think so. I wanted to ask you two questions about Cameroon. One is, since the Secretary General's visit, there are reports of a crackdown in a place called Jikiri, where one gendarme was killed, and now basically everyone is being told that there'll be collective punishment unless a gun is turned over. And I wanted to know, is Mr. Fall, after the visit, who's keeping track of it? Also, bigger picture maybe, the Cross River State Governor in Nigeria, Ben Ayade, has said that the border has essentially been closed for people fleeing the Anglophone region of Cameroon. And I wanted to know whether that's something that either Mr. Fall or on the, UNHCR
I don't have anything,
is aware of.
UNHCR, you can check with them. I don't have anything on more on Cameroon.
Is there any, I guess what I'm saying is, if Mr. Fall was there on the trip, he wasn't in the photograph with
He was there. We'd already
Okay.
said he was there.
All right. So what was any plan reached for continued work?
If there's a further visit that he's able to make, we will announce it. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Stephane. I would like to refer to the report to the General Assembly on the circumstances that led to the death of Dag Hammarskjöld and his companions. It has been put on the web. What other measures has DPI taken to bring the report to the attention of world community?
I think they've reported. I think it's been on the UN News Center, and then we rely on the members of the Free Press to also do that. Mr. Varma, I will have you brief very quickly, and then we'll go to our guest.